salutaris nostre, Domini ex Deus, Filii ex Deus, Filii ex Deus, Deus noster, Domini ex Esther, Angeli, Arcangeli, Ave Pateti, Laudem Domino Maestatis,
Hey, how's everybody doing? So this is a little bit different from my setup. Normally, I'm actually just in my car on my lunch break at work, and I decided that I wanted to, because of public outcry, because of the great mass of messages I've gotten asking about when I was going to release my next stream on Pius, Pope St. Pius X. So I decided that I'd just take a few minutes and to go over his life as a canon of his diocese and then as spiritual director of the seminary. So that's what I decided to do, to just take my time at on my lunch break, because I don't really do much but read anyways. But if you would like me to do more of these, then definitely become a patron at patreon.com/militant Thomist. And before this, I actually got like 20 minutes into the stream, and then I went back and realized that like it halfway through it stopped recording for some reason. So that was super annoying. But hey, you're getting it the second time around, so usually practice makes perfect. So this should be even better than the first time. But this has been very sought after, popular. As I said, public outcry, because I wanted to release one per week. So I guess I'll be doing more like two or three a week. So make sure you stay tuned and subscribe if you're enjoying this, because I will be, I think, doing about probably 10 episodes. So what is that, like six or seven more? So that's what I'll be doing in the future. And since this is so popular, I'll probably do a few more series on the lives of the saints. And I think that fills a gap in a lot of people's lives that that aren't filled in catechetically like it should be. Because normally, in the general history of Catholic uh, catechetical tradition and really social tradition, you'll get uh, that it's hagiographical. Probably that's the right way of saying it. You get a lot of the lives of the saints being put forward as exemplars in order to exemplify the Christian life, in order to, as St. Paul says, to follow after them as they follow Christ. So that, I think that's something that's very important and something we really long for. And I think that having this series hit a note in a lot of people, is they recognized that they love hearing stories about the saints. That's something in a way that's entertaining and not really dry and boring, in a way in which you're hearing about the whole life of the saint. You're not hearing just the general one or two miracle stories that they have, but you're really getting down to the the quote unquote early life section and the personal life section of the Wikipedia of their lives. Is you're hearing a little bit more about how they were actual people who and you're hearing about how they became saints, and the various struggles that they went through towards sanctity. And that's something which is very motivating, and it's been very motivating for me, reading on the life of Pope St. Pius X. So, and you get also, especially in the way that I'm doing it here, is you're getting a lot of the personality of Pope St. Pius X coming through. That Pope St. Pius X wasn't some boring person. He wasn't a square who had no fun. He had a very lively personality. People would say that he was very funny. People would say that they remember that I think in the future, when we go over him being a bishop, people would always say that when people went into Pope St. Pius X's office for a meeting because he kept his office open all the time for meetings, that his secretary said that he would always hear people laughing inside of the meetings because of uh, how funny he was and how much people loved being around him. And that's something that we miss a lot of times in a more rigid framework of viewing the lives of the saints, that they aren't people, but you can be an enjoyable person and a saint. You can be a good person to be around and a saint. And some of the most saintly people that I've met in my life have been people who I genuinely enjoy being around, not just because I'm following the exemplary image of virtue which they have placed before me, but also because they are just fun people to be around. I delight being around them in not just the sense of virtue. And I think genuinely that sitting down with a cigar with Pope St. Pius X would have been an amazing experience. It would have just been enjoyable. It would have just been a great conversation, not necessarily even about theological matters, but it would have just been fun. He was just must have been a great person to be around, and you see that a lot in a lot of the lives of the saints, not just Pope St. Pius X, who is often imaged as some tyrant and very rigid and angry all the time and always yelling about modernism and stuff. While that was a very based part of his life, yelling about modernism, and I wish more people did that. There were various facets to Pope St. Pius X. And as I mentioned before, this might randomly stop recording for like 15 seconds. And if that happens, um, it happens. So if I randomly stop talking for 15 seconds, I will I will eventually continue talking again. So just skip the video forward like 10 seconds and you should be fine. So you'll be fine. Don't worry about it. So I'm going to get right into it. We're going to be talking about this. Probably only will be another 10 or 15 minutes because I'm just going over his life as a canon, which wasn't too long before he was appointed a bishop. But as I said before, if you're really enjoying this, I would really appreciate um, you becoming a patron. It's of any amount, and I give you definitely your money's worth. Um, that would be really helpful because I definitely do want to do this full time. Working sucks. Well, not working in general. I like working, but working in a soul sucking environment uh, that sucks. I love working and I love doing this work, but my normal day job it is not fun. So if you would do that for me, I would very much appreciate it. It would help me be able to help you and be able to have me do more series. I'm thinking after this of doing a series on Saint Constantine the Great and maybe Blessed Charlemagne, Father Lagrange, and a few others that I've thought of. And then eventually, obviously, I'll do one on the life of Saint Thomas. But Saint Thomas is a little different. But we don't need to get into that now. So let's get into his life as a canon. Okay, so in 1875, that's where we're starting. A position for the canon of the Diocese of Treviso opened up, but also a position as the spiritual director at the seminary opened up at the same time. And it was pretty typical during these days for canons to have different jobs besides just being the canon of the cathedral. It wasn't really a full-time job. It was more of a pastoral position that they had, and they would often do other things in the diocese. So the bishop and the canons of the diocese decided that they wanted the same guy for that job. They were going to look for one package deal for this job, and almost everybody recommended Pius because at this time he had become famous through his preaching. He had even done stuff at the diocesan level, and people just absolutely loved Pius. So he was on the lips of everybody when it came to who they were going to hire for this job because, again, people just flipped out over Pius. Like you saw it, layman. He would just go to a town, preach, and people would just fall in love with him and want him to do everything. So it was a pretty easy choice for Pius getting this position. So the bishop actually was a bit worried for Pius even before this appointment, which was a motivating factor for the election of, well, the choosing by the bishop of Pius, because again the bishop was very worried that Pius was going to die. They thought that if they let him be alone for any more period of time, he would starve himself to death because of how much he absolutely loved giving his money away. He just loved giving his money away. He gave all of his money away to other people because he just loved people. That was something about Pius. He did not care about money. That was the least worry on his mind. So he would just give it away all the time and be like, "Well, whoops, there's no food to eat. I can't really afford it. I guess this is a an opportunity for virtue. I guess I can unite my sufferings to the sufferings of Christ and to become more cruciform." It was he's just amazing man. Like, as I said a million times before, just amazing man. Like, this is crazy. Like, this is something to absolutely follow after, is just this detachment from the world, for the things of God. It was just amazing, and most of us complain about having to abstain from meat on Friday. Like, no, it's not hard. Like, be like Pius. Be like Pius. So the bishop, worried about his health, decided that this would be great because now he would be at the seminary. And at the seminary, they would have communal meals, and Pius would be forced to eat. He wouldn't be able to. He could give away all his money, all he wanted. He could give away all his money, all his salary. The bishop totally fine with that now, because what Pius couldn't really give away is the meals that the seminary would provide for the professors and workers of the seminary and the students of the seminary. So no matter what, Pius was now eating. So Pius would not die. So the bishop was happy with this appointment, especially. So this was a very prominent upgrade for Pius, because before he was a parish priest of a pretty wealthy parish. His second appointment was pretty wealthy, but it wasn't on the level of a canon of the cathedral. So this was a huge upgrade for Pius, and it was a very prominent role. So, but Pius didn't really care about that. He didn't. He wasn't really concerned about his own earthly fame or glory. But objectively speaking, it was a very nice upgrade, even though he lived just as he had lived before, as we'll get into a bit later. So this was also a little bit more comfortable for Pius, which is interesting. He now was able to get 3 rooms, 3 smaller rooms, but still 3 rooms. It's pretty good for a single guy to have 3 rooms that you're able to sleep and study in, and to be able to do all your extra work in. So it was very nice for him. He had 3 rooms at the seminary, so that's pretty great, especially during that day. Um, and he is said to, at the seminary, have had the profoundest humility, as we've seen time and time again. And there's this interesting quote that I'm going to read to you guys from the first exhortation that he gave to the seminary students as their spiritual director, because this wasn't a teaching job, this was a job of spiritual direction, which, when we think of Pope St. Pius, we think of him a little bit more as a great teacher of the faith, which he was, a great scholar, which he was, even a musician, which he was. But when it comes to Pope St. Pius X, the most profound thing about his life, which people recognize from an early day, was his great ability in the spiritual life, um, his profound knowledge of the human condition, being able to lead people to virtue and to sanctity and to sainthood. This was something which Pope St. Pius excelled in. So he said, quote, shows that how Pius viewed himself. Even though he was a canon of the cathedral, he was a brilliant preacher. He was widely regarded within his diocese. All he saw himself through his entire life, even his life as a canon, as we'll see, as a bishop, and even as a patriarch, cardinal, and pope, that Pius Pope St. Pius X saw himself as merely a poor parish priest, as a poor kid from a poor home. That's what Pius saw himself as, even though, objectively speaking, that's not what he was, from any accounting of his life. But due to the profound humility, you'll see in the great spiritual writers, such as Saint John of the Cross, and such as Saint Thomas Aquinas, and Saint Teresa of Avila, you see that these great mystics, that the first step in the mystical life, in the spiritual life, is self-abasement, is viewing yourself as basically uh, the most terrible creature ever, so to speak, as viewing yourself in great humility and lowliness, as desiring this great humility and lowliness to not be glorious in the things of this world. And you'll see this later in his papacy, that he kind of thought that the papal tiara was a bit too gaudy for him, was a bit too glorious for the poor country boy, for the poor parish priest. He thought that he wasn't deserving of that glory. Although we can argue that the objective glory of the papacy as vicar of Christ um, uh, requires such outward glory, but he viewed himself in this light of humility his entire life, and it's just amazing. So he during this time as spiritual director, he was very effective. The students are said to have loved him, which isn't necessarily he's not necessarily the most popular man on campus. The spiritual director, usually this isn't seen as you might have a professor who's super popular, or somebody of that sort. But usually the guy that tells you to seek after virtue and to deny yourself, that's usually not the most popular guy on campus. Usually turns out to be some sort of gadfly, as Socrates was labeled. But people really loved him, and he was seen to be somebody who was very effective at his job. There are objective fruits of his labors in completely changing the way in which the seminarians' spiritual life was. So there's a funny note which is given in one of the biographies, a Forbes biography. He was said to be very, very concerned with personal cleanliness. That was something which was which is harped on over and over again by Pope St. Pius X. I'm not sure I'm not sure why, but one could posit that the reason was because when it comes to personal discipline, even in matters of such things as study, as personal cleanliness, and such other things as this really does play a large role in the spiritual life. That in the spiritual life, even the sort of natural discipline definitely plays and pours over into spiritual discipline. But the funny note that Forbes makes is that he says that this was odd for Pope St. Pius X in Italy to have very much success with personal cleanliness, because he says, quote, "This is not as rule the most prominent characteristic of southern nations." So I guess Italians were known for being dirty. Something about southern nations. I think Forbes was from England, so he might have a little bit of English supremacy there. But I thought that was a humorous note. So again, just as he had done previously as a parish priest at the seminary, he would give all his money away. He was making more money than he had in his entire life, and probably more than he could ever dream of, coming from the background he did. But still, he just gave all of it away. He would People would often go to him. They would have students whose mothers were widows and who needed to be taken care of, and the students would know to come to Pius and be like, "Look, my mom is in some financial trouble. I need money," and he would almost always give the money. And there's an interesting story about a particular student. So there was a seminarian who his mother and father were still alive, and they were still divorce didn't exist in this time. Divorce still doesn't exist, but they weren't separated or anything like that. But his dad was poor, just as Pius's dad was poor, and he needed a few pounds. I don't know what the money would be, but the author is British and he calls it pounds. So I'm guessing that wasn't the exact form of money. So I'm just gonna say dollars. He needed some money, that no matter what denomination of currency you're gonna say. So he needed money, and he went around and talked to his fellow students and lamented about how his father was about to just go completely broke, and how his family was going to starve to death. So the other students kept saying, like, look, go to Pius. You need to go to Pius. He will give you the money. He's good. He will always provide the money if there is somebody in need. And the student was very hesitant, but eventually the student capitulated and said, okay, okay, I will go to Pius. I will ask him about letting me borrow some money. So he goes to Pius, and he tells his story about how his dad was poor and his dad didn't have any money. And Pius said, "Look, I don't really have any money right now. I kind of gave all my money away already." And the student just breaks down crying and just flips out, but not flips out in a violent sense or an angry sense, but he is just at the realm of despair. So Pius says, "Look, look, look! Don't freak out. Please don't freak out. But make sure you just come back tomorrow. Come back tomorrow, and I will I'll find a way how to get the money." So the student calms down, and just the seminarian calms down, decides to go back to his room and hang out and wait for the next day. So the next day, the student comes back, and the student says, "Well, Pius," and Pius responds, "Well, seminarian." And the seminarian responds, "Do you have the money that my dad needs?" And Pope Pius, I'm not kidding, Pope Saint Pius the 10th, he responds, "What do I look like to you? Do I look like a bank? I can't make money come out of thin air." And the student absolutely breaks down again. And then Pius is like, "Wait, wait, wait, I promise, that was just a joke. That was just a joke. I was just messing with you." And he opens up his drawer and gives him the money. So I thought that was kind of a funny, Pius basically trolled one of the seminarians, it's I thought it was a funny story. And, and then Pius is like, "Look, you're gonna be a parish priest soon." And the guy's like, "Yeah, yeah." And Pius is like, "Okay, good, because I had to borrow this money, and I owe people money now. So if you would pay me back so I can pay back my debtors, that would be great. And thank you for that." So Pius, there's just plenty of stories from people who were seminarians under Pius at this time, of just things like that, of just his kindness, and then also it shows his light side to him, that uh, that this idea of the absolutely rigid and personalityless saint is not an accurate one. That you can be a saint and actually have a personality. So I'm sure, honestly, that Pope Saint Pius X, if he was around nowadays, he would love memes. He would definitely post memes, and even funny ones. I've had people get mad at me for posting memes as non-Christ like, poking fun at people, because I mean Pius X was an expert at poking fun at people. There's another story about him, that they would say that at at seminary meals, that he would chastise people often if they brought up um, the word logic or reason. That if people were just going to the table and just continuing to harp on and on about whatever they were learning that day, that he would stop them and be like, "Look, let's just get to know each other. Let's just talk about things. How life is going and stuff." And it was said that during lunch, he also would, in order to lighten the mood, he would poke fun at the professors to the students all the time. He would joke around with them about that. So it is, no, it's not necessarily a sin. People have often pointed to the book of Proverbs to me. When I poke fun at other people, good naturedly, from memes and saying like, "Oh, the wicked man deceives his neighbor and says that I was just kidding." But no, I have a saintly saintly backing to making memes, poking fun at people or groups. So he was said to do that very often, actually. So it was also said that during this time, you're going to see this was a perpetual focus of Pope Saint Pius X. He was very much focused on catechizing the kids of the area. So he would take it upon himself, even with all of his busyness, to catechize the local children. The other canons of the cathedral are like, "Look, Pius, you have a lot on your plate. Are you really sure? You're doing all this other stuff. Are you really sure you want to catechize these kids? We'll just get one of the lower priests to catechize them." And then Pius absolutely refused to not be the one to catechize the kids. He said that it is my job as a spiritual father to catechize these children who need to know the faith. I will continue to catechize these kids till the day I die. This is something which is not negotiable. I will catechize these kids, and this also lends credence to Pius being known. This was something that Pope Saint Pius X to this day is known for, is his catechetical abilities, and this is seen in the Catechism, the commonly called the Catechism of Pope Saint Pius X, which was used in Italy during his pontificate. It wasn't a universal catechism, but if you read it, it's a really wonderful catechism, and I definitely have gained much fruit from its use, and definitely in the future, I will continue to use it when it comes to my own catechetical adventures, because that's something which I also love to do. Is I think the thing that will be something which will change the future is catechizing kids in the faith. Just the three step program for all of you to save Western civilization. First, actually four steps. First, marry a good woman. Second, have a lot of children with her. Third, catechize these kids in the faith. And fourth, take them to mass. Four step program. That's basically um, and I know you guys might not necessarily love him the most, but if you read Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre, that's what he said was basically for those who are married. He said that's the way of doing it, to have a lot of kids or to become a priest, or if you're a female, then become a sister. That's the way of going about it. That's how you affect cultural change. It doesn't happen in a moment, and uh, training kids up in the true faith, to them to they themselves to train kids up in the true faith and to perpetually do this rather than the absolutely self-destructive habits of the secular world and the what is the word I'm thinking of, the propaganda that is being pushed by the world in the schools, both public and private. That the remedy for this is to have counter propaganda, have the wonderful narratives of the propaganda of the glorious West and of the glorious and saintly saints of the church. That is the way to counter propagandize the youths in order to get them away from secularism and to guard them from that. But that's just my brief aside. So continuing on, it is also said that during this time as a canon, as I said, there's not much material. This is my last point, but it is said that he loved to go on walks. That's something which Pope Saint Pius X did often. Is he would go on a nice little walk around town. He would do it every night. His schedule was very rigid. He would all day be doing stuff, and then finally he would get to his room at 9 o'clock at night, and then spend 3 or 4 hours studying. But he did take a walk during the day. That's very important, guys. Pope Saint Pius X, follow his example and actually go outside. Like don't stay indoors all day. Going outside and taking a walk will be good for you. Um, but he would take this walk every day, and it seems like a uh, mundane detail, but what would happen on these walks is he was so popular among the locals and among the seminarians that people would follow him on his walks. These were his personal walks, but he would sacrifice that time that he had to himself uh, in his enjoyment of his personal walks. And he would walk around, and rather than having it be idle time, all these people that would follow him on these walks, he would teach them the faith, and he would give them spiritual guidance and such like that. That is what Pius would do at all times. That just shows his sanctity, his love for teaching the faith, and his popularity among people as his time as canon. So that's all I have for you guys today. Thank you for watching. I'm sorry that this is such odd circumstances. I'm sure my AirPods aren't the best microphone in the world, so thank you for bearing with me. But if you again, sorry for mentioning this a third time, but um, if you would become a patron, that would be much appreciated, because that would help me in the future to be able to produce a lot more stuff like this. And maybe even I'm thinking about maybe doing a spin-off channel if these sort of playlists get a lot of popularity. Um, why why clog the Militant Thomist feed when I could do another series, because there it is lacking a bit. I mean, you'll get priests' homilies that are posted online, and maybe get sections which are read from the lives of the saints, but you don't really get these sort of merely narrative accounts of the life of saints. I think that's something which is really important, and something which is lacking and needed. That we need to know the tradition of our church, of the saints of our church. So I think that'd be cool. And I've always, even when I was, I probably did mention this before, but uh, when I was a catechist and an ordinand in the Anglican Church, that is something which I would do all the time. Is as sermon illustrations when I would preach quite often, and as illustrations when I was catechizing kids. Something which I drew on was my interest in the hagiographies and in the lives of the saints, which have been written over the years. Is I would use them as illustrations, and people absolutely loved it. People would always ask me about these cool stories about the saints, and I think that's just something which is very appealing. So in the future, I don't know, maybe I'll do more of this. Let me know if that's something you guys would be interested in this, because that is the reason I do this. I do this for you guys. I don't do this for myself. I definitely see this as a way of service to the church. If there's any way I can help Holy Mother Church. So thank you guys for listening, and do penance, for the kingdom of God is at hand.